Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute weekly show that airs at 8:30 a.m. each Saturday morning on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. Today, I'm speaking with Andrea Romero, New Mexico State Rep for District 46. And we'll get to Andrea in just a minute after a few short announcements. Before we get started, I always like to acknowledge that we are conducting this interview on stolen Tewa land and to thank our Tewa neighbors for being such good stewards of the land. We better start learning from them and learning fast. I also want to remind you that as part of our series on New Mexico Democratic House members, last week I spoke with Susan Herrera, House Rep for District 41. And next week I'll be speaking with Cristina Ortiz to complete the 5-week series that brought us Rena Sapansky, Roger Montoya, Susan Herrera, and now with Andrea Romero today and Cristina next week. That will complete the series. I want to remind you that if you're driving around and miss any of today's show, you can watch the full YouTube recording of this show and any prior interview, including any of the interviews with legislators, by going to retakeourdemocracy.org and clicking on the Retake on the Radio button on the right side of the homepage. You'll find YouTube recordings for all of our previous shows. With the 2022 session over, except for a very quick special session to be held, well, actually, it will have been held by the time we have this interview because we're recording it early. Retake is, in any case, is shifting its focus to the primary election. As part of that work, we are identifying races where either solid Democrats are being challenged by moderate or conservative Dems, or where an incumbent Dem is being challenged by a more progressive one. We will be announcing the list of races on which we are focusing very soon. As part of our election work, we just held a candidate forum with Democratic candidates for the New Mexico State Auditor. It was a stirring discussion with candidates not seeing the questions before the forum, so the answers couldn't be carefully crafted ahead of time. So you got a more unvarnished view of both Joe Maestas and Zach Quintero. You can view that debate by going to retakeourdemocracy.org and clicking on the Action and Events pin in the menu bar. The recording is near the top of that page. Retake is also getting ready for the interim hearings, which will begin soon. Retake is working with allies to support their interim hearing strategies and conducting supportive research and initiating dialogue with key legislators on key issues that Retake will be focused upon in 2022-23. Stay tuned, as there will be actions you can take in both the primaries and the interim hearings. If you want to keep current on the interim hearings and on election actions, you should go to our Retake page and go to Actions and Events, and you'll see our huddles. We do huddles the second Wednesday of every month from 6 to 7:30. And that's where we discuss our strategy. And it's really forming a kind of Retake community. I think Andrea's been on a couple of them. So that's one way to keep informed. We'll also be initiating a range of proactive strategies to prepare for the 2023 legislative session. This work will include working closely with key allies and legislators to cultivate interest, understanding, and support for bills we support. Retake will be most active engaging and educating key legislators on the issues that we plan to introduce in 2022-23, introduce or support. So that's about it. Our next huddle will be actually this coming Wednesday, April 13th, from 6 to 7:30. You must register to participate in the huddle by going to retakeourdemocracy.org and clicking on the Actions and Events menu bar. And a page will open up and information about the huddle is near the top. That's more than enough announcements, a little bit repetitive, and I apologize for that. Welcome, Andrea. Thanks for making time for the conversation.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I love talking to you about all things New Mexico.
Okay, well, let's start. I always like to let our guests introduce themselves. So how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in policy and politics in general, and how that led you to serving as the rep for District 46.
I love this question. I never really, it was interesting for me to even think about when this may have started on my life's journey. And it goes back, I think, for me as a student at Santa Fe High, when 9/11 happened, I had never thought about the rest of the world and how it affected me and who was making decisions. And from that sort of moment, it led me to really getting involved even locally in what was going on in politics. I think the first election that I ever participated in was with John Kerry. I was, adamantly opposed to the war in Iraq. And I think I had a photo on the front page of the New Mexican with him as a 16-year-old Make Love Not War t-shirt, in my t-shirt. And then moving on to, knocking doors for Obama. I went and knocked doors in Nevada right after the recession, where every other home in that we were knocking on was in foreclosure. It was terrifying to see all of that. So having all of these sort of different adventures in politics early on as a student, and then moving my life to Mozambique, Africa, getting involved in the food policy work that I was doing then sort of helped me understand what I wanted to participate in democracy, was trying to figure out how to do the basics well. And that allowed me to come back home and think about all of the different ways I could participate, started volunteering and was on boards and just a bunch of sort of groundwork. And in 2016, when Trump got elected, I was super worried about holding the line in my own neighborhood, in my own backyard, and started looking at who does represent me. I hadn't really participated in all of that other than supporting different candidates. And when I realized that in our state legislature, the incumbent at the time didn't really reflect our democratic progressive values, I felt very called to try to see that, after asking a million people to run other than myself, who could run and perhaps be more reflective of those values. And at the time that I was asking everyone who would run for this seat, folks were saying, how about you? And so that was really me stepping up at that point in my value and in that space to be able to try to contribute in this way. And now I'm looking and seeking a third term to continue the work that we've been building upon in our legislature, which makes so many important decisions. And I'm so grateful and honored to be able to serve in that capacity, being that we have held the line on so many bad national policies while Trump was in office, and have continued to progress in the ways that I think New Mexico is on the right track right now.
Okay, so you've been in two full sessions now, or 4 full sessions now, two full terms. What would you identify as your greatest accomplishment as a legislator?
Well, in the timeliness of this recording, we have cannabis legalization as far as the recreational market opening up April 1st. So we will have had a week, I think, to flesh out how it's gone. And I think that's huge for New Mexico as far as looking at how we diversify our economy, how we continue to progress forward with our values. We had a huge criminal justice component to that law that automatically expunged records for those that were criminalized by cannabis. And so that was huge. We've continued to make progress with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives task force that was that I fortunately was able to be part of its inception story in 2019. And now we're seeing the policies come to fruition. The first bill signed from this past session was Missing in New Mexico Day, a statewide effort to help law enforcement and families cohere around finding missing persons. As tragic as these stories are and have been, there's a glimmer of hope with what we've continued to build upon, and having a liaison in the AG's office, so our Indigenous communities are well served by our law enforcement. So that's huge. We're still on the path of furthering housing efforts in our state. We just passed a landmark $25 million a year annual fund for housing, affordable housing in our state, which has never been done before. We've never invested that. We get a 29-to-1 return on investment. It's the first time we're actually seeing that come to fruition. But generally,
that was your bill, wasn't it, Andrea?
I advocated for it. So we had 2 separate housing bills. That one started in the Senate. That was Senator Nancy Rodriguez. And we supported it in our House and was proud to stand up and support, and have been working with the Mortgage Finance Authority, which is our version of how we support, it's a quasi-governmental organization that does affordable housing in our state, and I serve on that committee. So we've been just building upon all of these different things, but I don't feel like I have one hat that I wear in the legislature. We've been working toward women's rights, reproductive health rights, education, better pay for everyone, better tax structuring. And of course, I serve as our House parliamentarian now and the chair of Rules and Order of Business, which I truly believe in legislative power and expanding it, power to the people, and we'll continue to fight for that in our legislature.
Okay. So you must have had some disappointments. What would be your biggest disappointments as a legislator?
Well, I think it's the work still ongoing. This, unfortunately, not everything happens in one fell swoop. Housing
Right.
legislation being part of that and modernizing our landlord tenant law. We're starting to see the waves of eviction happen right now without a moratorium in place post-COVID. And despite the fact that we have $200 million available for renters across the state, as that continues to decline and as folks, continue to seek for housing while rates are going up, I am greatly worried about our state's renters. And of course, living in Santa Fe, the price of everything feels too darn high. And, for renters especially, I think we just need to work together with landlords and how we improve that. Voting rights legislation, as I don't know if you've been watching recent Frontlines on PBS and otherwise, I think we can do more to strengthen our elections. And I was sad to see the Senate filibuster what we had passed available to us, and continuing to ensure that everyone has the right to vote. That
I hope you didn't wind up listening to that. Oh, my.
I did take a walk over to the Senate just to see it, to try to look, Senator Schumer in the eye and say, how could you do this? It was just so sad to see. But it's part of the process, and we'll keep fighting for what we believe in. And following that, I would just say on water, how we regulate water in our state, how we manage water in the state is something I am extremely passionate about. And I'm working with many advocates now to try to strengthen what we do in a time of drought, which now seems continual. And, we don't manage water well at all when it comes to drought as a state. So looking to modernize our laws in that regard as well.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. What frustrates you most about the New Mexico state legislative process? Not just necessarily what happened the last session, but the way the thing plays out.
Yeah. Systemically, you talk about this all the time, and we do, and we hear from everyone, I think, in our districts, that I was always shocked to either learn or to know that we're unpaid part-time legislators. The fact that we can't be full-time dedicated to the needs of New Mexicans and working on policy with a staff that is fully dedicated to our legislative priorities, to me it just continues to show why we might be slow to be able to do these things. And why it shouldn't be remarkable that we get so many things done in a legislative session. But we have, because we have that sort of weakness in our 60-day session versus our 30-day session as well, where in the 30-day, right, the governor designates what policy initiatives we get to hear. And so it just limits us legislatively to be able to do what I think the people need us to do with those constraints. And so I really hope we can, change that. And I know that we have studies ongoing that help us understand and determine the right way to go about it. I'm into that. I really hope we can fix that soon, very soon.
Yeah, I hope we can do that as well. I think we need to pay staff and legislators, and then we need to make some changes to the legislative process too. I mean, I just think that the public comment set piece of legislative process is almost a joke. I mean, you get a minute to express a view, and you get them boom, 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 one right after the other. And then, if you're opposing a bill, then the sponsors have as long as they want to lay out why everything that the constituents said is not accurate. And it's not a level playing field at all.
I agree. And when more people attend, city council meetings than state legislative hearings, something's up with that, when the decisions that we're making impact everyone's life around the state.
Mhm, mhm. So from your perspective, what kinds of changes need to be made to the legislative process beyond, paying salaries? It'd be nice if the legislators actually looked like New Mexico instead of retired folks and
Yeah,
lawyers.
it is. It is challenging, as a working person and professional, you juggle how to get bills paid, how to be able to attend everything, being that it is a volunteer, service. And so when it comes to just the way our sessions are dispersed, any job that you have, you also have to take 30 days or 60 days off in order to be able to serve in the legislature. So having more interspersed sessions across the year while we're unpaid would be great. But also, I think even if we were paid and there were staff available to be reflective of real time what's going on in the state. We make all of our decisions at the beginning of the year, and then COVID happens, and then something else may come about, and we need to be able to actively go into session to do that. And right now, only the governor can call those sessions. And so it all sort of works together for us to be able to keep New Mexico going. And right now, just systemically, it doesn't really reflect, I think, what we need to get done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I need to take a little break here to remind our listeners that you're listening to KSFR, Santa Fe's public radio station. And it's at times like these when the social media and the mainstream media are so dominated by misinformation and alternate facts and just out and out lies, that a radio station that offers truly high quality reporting with excellent news broadcasts, local state coverage, programs like Democracy Now! Every night. This is a great resource to our community, including their coverage of cultural events, arts, and so forth. And so if you have a spare $10 or $20 after you finish listening to the program, go to ksfr.org, click on the donate button, and make your donation. Think of it as your ticket for admission to some great programming. So thank you for that. Let's get back to our discussion with Andrea Romero. The governor certainly made a statement in vetoing the junior bill allocations. We're having this interview just a few days before the special session, so Andrea is not going to be able to tell us how it plays out. But do you think that she had other better options for making a statement about junior funding other than the way she handled it?
Well, I appreciate that. And I, was thinking forward about where we are, when we as a legislature, with even the limited power that we had, heard about the veto. And I know our House chamber was immediately, our caucus was immediately going, wait a second, it may be, it's $50 million, which means a ton to our state, especially as we continue to look at micro projects across the state that this funds. As far as making a statement, the legislature immediately responded by saying that's just not okay. We need this. We need this for our communities, and we need to make sure that we've protected, the power of the purse in this regard. And we really want to go back to the drawing board and perhaps overturn this veto. And I think the point that was made too is that we can negotiate. That we were able to speak to the governor's office. We have the special session to resolve this. And hopefully by, the time this is broadcast, we will have been done with the special and the junior bill will be back in effect. But as far as just being able to, see what feathers were ruffled, by now they'll be properly fluffed and back into action, as the legislature intended, and hopefully that the governor supports, plus the opportunity to revisit, what I think families are really dealing with right now, which is a lot of rising prices and inflation. and to be able to give some money back to those. While we're in a boom year, it appears 40%, our reserves are up 40% at the start of the year. So from even 2021. So it gives us an opportunity to put that money back into New Mexicans' pockets. So I'm glad that we get to do both and for this special.
Okay, I am too. I'll be looking forward to watching. Going forward, would you like to maintain the junior bill option?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like capital outlay. It's for those that are not intricately involved in the budget making process, whether you sit on appropriations or not, it gives the entire legislative body participation in what's going on in their communities to actually advocate for funding in those micro projects that are going on in their community. For me, and what I was able to do, for instance, there was no funding for the Water Data Act, which is current law. And so without the junior budget, there was no infill for funding to be able to keep that going. For instance, in 2019, when we had the junior budget, then that's what it was able to upstart the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives Task Force. Without that funding, we would have never been able to start that. And so these sort of micro funds, we're not talking about millions of dollars, we're talking about thousands that our budget comes about when we do have a surplus, and we're able to direct it directly toward communal needs. And then anywhere else in the budget, it goes directly to these various departments, and it's really still very much designed by the governor, and of course negotiated with the heads of our finance committees in both the House and the Senate. I don't get to participate in all of that. So junior budget really gives us a hands-on approach to that. I just wish it was in the vernacular of what we do currently. It doesn't have to be transparent. And I'm telling your listeners, our constituents right now, how I'm spending that funding, but no legislator has to do that currently. We changed that with capital outlay. It has to be 100% transparent. Who's directing what funds and to whom. We need to do that with junior budget as well.
I agree. Otherwise, it's a little bit too much like a pork slush fund. And I, when the junior bill was vetoed, after I got up off the floor from being so shocked, I went and I looked at every single allocation in the junior bill, and there wasn't a pork allocation in there. And I interviewed Roger Montoya the other day, and he had a great way of characterizing. He goes, the capital outlay money can build buildings, but the junior bill money can put people in those buildings to actually deliver the services that the people need. And so that's why he's a big supporter of the junior bill. And I thought that was a good characterization.
Right. That's right.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. You're being challenged in the primary. Who are your opponents, and why should District 46 voters choose you as their representative?
Yeah, so I have two opponents. Commissioner Henry Roybal, who's terming out at the county, is running as I understand, a conservative Democrat. He has a PAC that is supporting him, that's, I guess funded by oil and gas and a lot of corporate interest. So I would hope that that's alarm bells going off to many of our community members, being that that's sort of the angle that he's coming with. And then a newcomer.
I'm sure you're going to be disappointed, Andrea, to hear that we're going to be reporting on that PAC as soon as their campaign contributions become public next week.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's really important. I don't take any oil and gas money on principle, being that funds the majority of our government when we're in a boom year. It just doesn't make sense to me. And of course, it's not where our values are when it comes to what we're trying to do with clean energy in our state. Another challenger is newcomer Ryan Salazar, who I unfortunately know little about. I don't know much about what his platform is or where he's coming from. So we're hoping to just continue to talk about what we've been doing in this seat for the past now 4 years, and continue to run on a track record of progressive initiatives and advocacy that we have across the state, from housing to workers, environment to putting people first. I think I have a track record now of how I've served and the votes and legislation I've been able to support. And so on behalf of our district, I would love the honor of continuing to fight and for what we believe in.
Okay, so you've mentioned values as being part of your determination when you're deciding what to support and oppose. What are those values? What values are important to you in prioritizing legislation?
So I have my own little ritual as I cast votes on the floor of the House. And so it just kind of gets me a point of being able to center my thoughts and the whole idea of it taking a village, that it's not just me casting votes for myself, but on behalf of the oldest member of our society and the youngest members of our society. And for me, it's about thinking about that spectrum of how does this affect people at both ends of that spectrum, and then of course everyone in between in that decision. And so that whole it takes a village, for me to even be able to serve, it also requires that the village is well served by that. And so as far as values go, is just looking at all of that in between.
So we're running low on time now, Andrea. So I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can get in touch with your campaign and what kind of support you might need.
Sure. Yeah, so we're looking for as much support as we can, knocking on doors, we're walking. When the weather's been nice, we've had this awesome weather so far. So we are recruiting volunteers. AndreaRomero.com is the easiest way to get in touch with me. If you can make a contribution, $5, $10, $25, everything helps right now. We just, that helps us get the message out to voters and vote early when we get that opportunity. So that way we tick the box on you. Otherwise, we're going to come and knock on your door. But everyone, we're trying to fire up our bases and just get everyone involved. But feel free to email me, Andrea@AndreaRomero.com. And we can get everyone everyone suited up and ready to go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for taking the time, Andrea. And, we're going to pause for a minute after I close the show and we'll finish our conversation on YouTube. I want to thank our listeners for being with us. We'll be back next week at 8:30 a.m. with Amber Wallen, the Executive Director of New Mexico Voices for Children. And I'm positive she'll be here because I recorded the show earlier today. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's really good. So that'll be next week. And we're going to be talking about not global, guaranteed basic income. And there's a pilot project in New Mexico, and I'm going to be working with Patricia Roybal Caballero to try and advance another pilot in New Mexico with the 2023 legislative session. So we'll be talking about that next week. So in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll be back next week. Thank you very much. Okay, by the miracle of YouTube, we're back, and I'm going to have to take a quick look here. Oh, I see what we were talking about. We were talking about your principles. So now you get a chance to show us those principles and values with a pop quiz kind of thing. I've got 8 or 9 bills or issues listed here. I'm going to give them to you, and you can just say support, strongly support, oppose, or I really need more information. And none of these are bills yet, so that's obvious. So it's the concept that we're asking for a reaction to. And after we get done with it, we may turn around and have a deeper discussion about 1 or 2 of them. Anyway, the first one, public bank.
I'm for, I would like it to be more innovative, I think, than it is currently, in particular where banking is voided right now, where we talk about payday loans, we talk about cannabis and the challenges of banking. I think if they focused on some of the low-hanging fruit for where folks are needing banking, it could be a bigger bang.
All righty. And Health Security Act.
100% for. I think we can start with improving, hopefully, like our health exchange right now for those that aren't covered by Medicaid, Medicare. if we could focus on that for Health Security Act, I think that'd be a great way to pilot what we need to do in New Mexico.
Okay. Hydrogen hub.
No, not for, this is not a renewable energy. This is not something that I think is to the level of what we're looking for in New Mexico. I think even fusion or might be more interesting for us here. But putting forth our efforts not into what we know is proven in renewables and storage, to me just seems like way too long of a long shot that I'm not willing to cast a vote in favor for.
Okay, great. Well, we agree about that one for sure. Public power, a study of public power.
Yes, I sponsored this, but after learning that on the contingency that we can work with our unions to build upon this idea, I understand they're worried about what our intentions are and how we move forward with this study. So if we can work with them on a common goal, I'm 100% wanting to move in that direction.
Okay, I think that is going to be the absolute requirement. I'm working with the steering committee, trying to move that bill, get that ready for the next session. And that's one of the things we've just got to address, because they really came out strongly opposed, and that's why it didn't even budge.
That's right.
So universal basic income study or guaranteed basic income study.
Absolutely.
All
This
right.
has been proven time and time again, and I think we're ready for a larger portion of the population to test its worth.
Okay, yeah, it's being tested right now with 300 people in Somos's programs. And
Yep.
I talked with Amber Wallen about it today, and I'm very excited about doing some work on that.
That's
Green
great.
Amendment.
Yes, but I do think it also requires a bit more education to some of those concerned with the implication of the Civil Rights Act. And so it gets a bit wonky to the legal ramifications, but we don't want any unintended consequences. And I think it just requires a bit more information for those that are still skeptical.
Okay, great. Tax credits for electric vehicles and rooftop solar.
Yes, now and always, and we need to continue to expand this. And I also think we could be a bit more targeted to those who are in need, that we might be able to actually look at how these subsidies affect especially low and middle income families, which are currently are on the fringes of who really gets these benefits currently.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. The electric vehicles are coming down in price now. And if the tax credits could be large enough, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and then capped so that if you earn over $60,000 a year or whatever, something, you're not eligible, then, low income people could actually compete with me for those cars. And they should.
That's the game. That's what I'm hoping that we can target for both rooftop and, like you said, electric vehicles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're on the same page on that one too. No wonder I support you. How about full funding for the New Mexico Environment Department to allow for closer monitoring of gas and oil operations?
Absolutely. The budget across all of our environmental organizations need to continue to increase. We did see a 16% increase for the Environment Department this past year, 12% increase for energy, minerals, natural resources, and 13% for the Office of the State Engineer, who oversees all of our water. But those need to continue to rise. We know that they're hiring. We know that there's still vacancies, but we know that they need to, we keep giving them more jobs to do, and we expect that they do them.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah,
unfunded mandates, we call those.
That's right. That's exactly right. Which we don't like. We need to fund the mandates.
Yes, I agree. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the global effort or non-effort to address climate change. The IPCC just released yet another report, bleaker than the last, and the last one was pretty bleak. And it just seems like that all that the IPCC is able to do is generate reports that are ignored. The window is rapidly closing on when the world can stave off the worst of consequences coming from climate change. New Mexico is sitting in a really difficult spot, and Retake acknowledges this. In some ways, I like to think of New Mexico as almost like a microcosm for the international situation, where we have a really strong reliance on gas and oil revenue that pays for all the good things we like about our state. And yet that revenue is coming from drilling in the Permian Basin and Northwest New Mexico. And that reliance comes with a steep price tag in terms of the future. And it seems like any time we have discussions in the legislature about, anything we can do to accelerate our transition to renewables or limit our reliance on gas and oil, and we get the same sky is falling kind of reaction from the usual suspects, and the bills go nowhere. Do you actually see a path forward where we could reduce our reliance on gas and oil and start to wind down our drilling activities? And if so, where does that begin?
So I'm focusing so many efforts on water, and for us, we can, I think, solve many problems if we were able to manage it the way that it is such a precious resource. We talk about el agua es la vida. We talk about the fact of, the drought constantly in so many different ways, about how we grow as a state, about what we can do to even grow an industry like cannabis. So many folks are so worried about water, and yet we don't manage it in its scarcity. And I think when we talk about the industries that are taking and that are lacking, again, that oversight that we were just talking about with our different agencies, we're not even meeting the current demands of the law when it comes to regulation surrounding water, which is, again, our most precious resource. But here's gas that, oil and gas that helps fund all of these programs that we want to continue to grow. And so when it comes to how we manage water in the state, I think if we focused on that as our way of looking at how our lens of all of our different growth and how we hold industries accountable, in particular oil and gas, which right now, I don't know if you know that the way water is managed, depending on the way that it's flowing, left or right, depending on if it's above ground, underground, different departments manage it. And so it makes it really easy for these industries to kind of get away with this while the government is going, which way was it flowing? Was it above ground, underground? Did it go from down to up, etc.? And they can get away with a lot of that. And I think if we are really focused on water as both the thing that we need to be able to regulate best in the state is connected to the oil and gas community, it helps us create that venue and vehicle for better regulation overall, and helping us understand what growth mechanisms we have available to us if we were managing water as a very scarce resource to us.
Okay, good. If you had a crystal ball, who would you see emerging as the next Speaker of the House?
This is such a hard question. I don't want to throw any of my colleagues under the bus by putting them on the spot here. I haven't said anything publicly about this, nor to the folks that I would love to see as Speaker directly. So I feel like until I get their go ahead that they would even consider it. It's not me, I can tell you that much. I am not considering, nor will I ever put my name in that hat. But I think there are a lot of amazing progressive people in our caucus who I would love to support. But I don't want to put anyone on the spot right now.
Okay. Oh, well, that's fair enough. Well, here's an easy one for you. If you could be the chair of any committee, what would it be and why?
Rules and order of business, and I am the chair. No, I have the fortunate ability to be the chair right now of rules and order of business, and this keeps our legislature going in the sense that it's very much how the legislature is run. We increased the amount of bills that we were able to hear this last session by making them germane through a process in that committee. It dovetails with my work as parliamentarian, which keeps us moving. And so when there's shenanigans from the right, or issues with the process moving forward, I get to be able to step in and make sure it keeps moving while we're so time limited. Other than that, I'm remiss to say that I would want to chair any other committee. I think when it comes to the powers that be, I really do trust our our speaker right now, and hope to have a speaker in place that understands how critical that leadership is moving forward. So I might have a different answer for you next year when things are possibly changing.
Yeah, they've got to call the caucus together and see who wants the position, I guess. It's the
That's
first
right.
thing. Yeah. So that's about all we have time for today, Andrea. I want to wish you the best of luck with your campaign. And how about if for the people on YouTube, if you give information about how people can reach you one more time?
Yeah, sure. AndreaRomero.com. If you want to get in touch with what we're up to as a campaign and make a contribution, you can do it there, or sign up to help knock doors with us. We're walking neighborhoods when the weather's nice. We're getting out there, and of course, Andrea at AndreaRomero.com is the way to contact me via email. You can text me, give me a call, 505-490-6155. And I would love to be in touch with you. We're fired up, ready to go. We've got tons to do before June 7th, and would love to have as many people participating as we can.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And we'll be posting information on our website about your campaign as soon as we get around to it. It's going to take a couple weeks.
Okay, no problem. All
Okay.
right.
All right. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Paul. All right, take good care. We'll see you soon.
Okay. And
Bye.
to our listeners on YouTube, we'll be back next week. I mentioned that it'll be a recording, an interview with Amber Wallen from New Mexico Voices for Children. And I'm positive it'll be the show because we recorded it today. And don't ask me what's the week after that, because I have no idea. But stay healthy, stay safe, and stay active. It's the only way we fix this mess. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks, Paul. See you soon.
Bye-bye.